Imagine kicking off one of the boldest sci-fi films of all time, only to find out you don't even have the legal right to make it. That's how chaotic the production of War of the Worlds really was. Behind the Martian heat race and city-crushing war machines was a story of lawsuits, accidents, censorship battles, and desperate last-minute fixes that could have buried the movie before it ever reached theaters. This wasn't just a simple adaptation of H.G. Wells' classic. It was a roller coaster of blown budgets, bizarre special effects tricks, and risky stunts that nearly cooked the crew alive. So buckle up. These are 12 shocking, weird, and downright unbelievable facts about War of the Worlds. Number 1, Paramount started filming without the rights. You'd think a giant studio would make sure they legally owned a story before spending millions filming it. Not Paramount. They thought their 1925 deal with the H.G. Wells estate gave them movie rights forever. But there was a catch. That old contract only covered a silent film version. By the 1950s, sound films were the standard, which meant the entire production of War of the Worlds was basically illegal. Imagine the panic. Cameras were already rolling, actors were in costume, and suddenly lawyers realized the studio didn't even have the right kind of rights. Paramount scrambled, cut a new deal with the Wells estate, and only then could they legally keep filming. One of the greatest sci-fi movies ever made started its life on shaky, almost criminal ground. Number 2, the Martian war machines were almost flying saucers. When people think of War of the Worlds, they picture those eerie manta ray-shaped war machines gliding through smoke and rubble. But that design wasn't the original plan at all. At first, Paramount wanted flying saucers, the classic UFO you'd see on every pulp magazine cover. The problem? By the early 1950s, UFO hysteria was everywhere. News reports, tabloids, conspiracy theories. Audiences were already drowning in stories of little green men. The filmmakers worried the movie would look like just another cheap alien flick, so they scrapped the saucers and went bold. Special effects legend Al Nuzaki designed the sleek, curved war machines we know today. Part manta ray, part cobra, with cobra-like necks shooting deadly heat rays. It gave the film an identity that still feels alien decades later. Number 3, special effects were a nightmare. The Martian war machines looked incredible on paper, but bringing them to life nearly broke the crew. They were suspended by visible wires, which reflected the studio lights like crazy. No matter how much they adjusted, the wires ruined take after take. The solution? Smear the wires with baby oil and blast them with arc lights to make them vanish on film. It worked, barely. And it forced the effects team to invent tricks on the fly, turning each battle scene into a high-stakes experiment. Number 4, the actors were nearly cooked alive. The Martians weren't the only ones bringing the heat. The set itself turned into an oven. To simulate the burning destruction caused by Martian weapons, the crew relied on gigantic carbon arc lamps, some of the hottest and brightest lights available at the time. These things blasted so much heat that the temperature on set skyrocketed to well over 130 degrees. Actors stood under the beams in heavy costumes while cameras rolled. And it wasn't long before people started collapsing. Extras fainted, makeup literally melted off faces, and crew members had to rotate in and out just to keep filming going. One cameraman later said it felt like standing in front of the sun. The irony, the Martians never touched a single actor. It was the movie magic itself that nearly wiped them out. Number 5, censorship almost killed the violence. The 1950s were not exactly friendly to movies that pushed the envelope. When Paramount submitted War of the Worlds to the censors, they nearly had a meltdown. Exploding cities, burning bodies, and screaming crowds. Too much for the family audiences of the era. Some officials demanded the studio tone down the chaos, especially the scenes showing panicked civilians being fried by Martian heat rays. Paramount fought back, arguing that the destruction was the whole point. It wasn't a polite alien visit. It was the end of the world. In the end, a few shots were trimmed, but the film kept its terrifying edge. Critics later called it one of the most intense sci-fi movies of its time. Hurry up, jump in, there was a girl with him, if I could find them. Number 6, alien blood wasn't alien at all. When the filmmakers needed Martian blood, they didn't turn to some futuristic lab. They went to the local butcher. The alien fluid splattered on screen was nothing more than dyed animal organs and blood pulled straight from a slaughterhouse. The effects team mixed in green coloring to give it that otherworldly vibe, then carefully filmed the mess under harsh lights so it would glisten and ooze. Audiences gasped in horror. But if they'd known it was basically butcher shop leftovers, the reaction might have been less sci-fi shock and more gross. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. Keep watching because coming up, we've got a near fatal onset explosion, the director's breaking point, and even the laugh-out-loud Martian designs that almost ruined the movie. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. Number 7. The sound of the Martians came from animals. The filmmakers wanted the Martians to sound terrifying, something inhuman that would stick in your head, but back in 1953, there were no digital effects, no fancy synthesizers. So the sound team had to get creative. They ended up layering together animal cries, scraping metal, and electronically distorted recordings until it formed the eerie, high-pitched shriek that became the Martian's voice. Rumor has it they even used distorted recordings of a tortured pig to get the unsettling effect. The result, a sound so alien and unnatural that audiences squirmed in their seats. It was unforgettable, but it wasn't the only trick the sound team pulled. In fact, one of the film's most iconic effects came from an accident in the editing room. Number 8. The heat ray sound was discovered by accident. The Martian heat ray had to sound like nothing on Earth. Deadly, alien, and unforgettable. But no one could agree on what death by laser should actually sound like. The sound team tried words, pops, even explosions, but everything felt too familiar. Then, in a stroke of luck, an engineer stumbled across the noise made when striking an electric guitar string with a metal object, then playing it backward through an echo chamber. Add in some electronic distortion, and suddenly they had it. The piercing, otherworldly zap that audiences would never forget. It wasn't just a sound effect. It was a sonic trademark of alien destruction. Decades later, it's still one of the most iconic sound cues in sci-fi history. Number 9. Actors clashed behind the scenes. On screen, humanity was united against an alien invasion. Off screen, not so much. The main cast didn't always get along, and tension bubbled under the surface during long, grueling shoots. Anne Robinson, who played Sylvia, later admitted she struggled with co-star Gene Barry's intensity. Barry was known for being meticulous, sometimes too meticulous, and it slowed filming to a crawl. Crew members whispered about the two trading sharp comments between takes, though they always pulled it together once the cameras rolled. It wasn't a full-blown Hollywood feud, but it added just enough drama to an already stressful production. And speaking of stress, the director himself nearly reached a breaking point before the movie was finished. Number 10. Director Byron Haskin nearly broke down. Guiding War of the Worlds was no easy ride for Byron Haskin. He'd been a respected effects artist before becoming a director, but this film pushed him harder than anything he tackled before. Every day brought a new disaster. Wires showing up on film, sensors breathing down his neck, actors fainting under the heat lamps, and studio executives demanding faster progress. Haskin was caught between creative ambition and constant crisis management. At one point, insiders claimed he nearly walked off the project entirely, exhausted by the non-stop pressure. But somehow, he stuck it out, keeping the production on track, even when it looked like the film might collapse. The breakdown never came, but the toll was obvious. By the time the movie wrapped, Haskin looked more like a man who'd survived an alien invasion than someone who had directed one. Number 11. A set accident nearly turned deadly. Big sci-fi effects in the 1950s meant big risks. During one climactic sequence, rigged explosions were set to go off as actors ran for cover. The timing was supposed to be precise. Fireballs would erupt just after the cast cleared the danger zone. But something went wrong. One of the charges detonated early, sending a blast of heat and debris frighteningly close to the actors. Crew members dove for cover, and a cameraman swore he felt his eyebrows singe off. For a moment, everyone thought they just witnessed a fatal accident. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but the scare rattled the entire set. From then on, the explosions were double-checked and rehearsed with almost military precision. Number 12. The first Martian designs were laughable. Everyone remembers the Martians as slimy, glowing creatures that looked unsettlingly alien, but the early designs, they were downright goofy. The first concept sketches showed them as little more than oversized bug-eyed puppets with floppy limbs. When the prototypes were tested on set, the crew couldn't stop laughing. Instead of terrifying, they looked like children's toys. The effect killed the mood instantly. Realizing disaster was imminent, the design team scrapped everything and started over. They eventually settled on the more menacing clawed creatures we see in the final cut. Eerie enough to haunt audiences, yet mysterious enough to keep most of the terror hidden in the shadows. It was a last-minute save that turned embarrassment into nightmare fuel. Number 13. The wires wouldn't stay hidden. The The Martian war machines were supposed to glide through the air like unstoppable predators. In reality, they dangled from wires, and those wires became the crew's biggest nightmare. No matter how they lit the models, the wires kept catching the studio lights. In the pristine Technicolor prints of 1953, most audiences didn't notice. But as the film aged and color faded, the wires started to pop out like sore thumbs. By the time TV reruns hit in the 70s and 80s, fans were laughing at the floating toys on strings instead of ducking under their seats. It wasn't until the 2018 4K restoration that technicians finally fixed the problem. By going back to the original 3-strip negatives, they adjusted contrast and digitally painted out reflections, making the machines look terrifying again. The aliens didn't just invade Earth, they accidentally exposed Hollywood's trickiest strings. Number 14. The budget was swallowed by special effects. War of the Worlds had a production budget of about $2 million. Serious money for 1953. But here's the kicker. More than half of it, around 1.3 to 1.44 million, went straight into special effects. Miniature cities had to be built and destroyed. Martian war machines wired up and lit. Explosions timed to the second. And alien goo cooked up in the lab. It was a non-stop drain on the budget. For context, most big studio dramas at the time cost less than $1 million total, meaning this sci-fi spectacle burned through more on effects alone than many films did on everything. The gamble paid off. The Oscar-winning visuals turned a pulp invasion story into a landmark of cinematic spectacle. But it left Paramount executives sweating because one delay, one failed shot, and that mountain of cash would have gone up in smoke. Number 15. The UK thought it was too scary. When War of the Worlds crossed the Atlantic, British censors weren't impressed. They were horrified. Exploding cities, panicked crowds, and bodies turned to ash. For 1953 audiences, it was considered way too intense. The film was slapped with an X certificate, which at the time meant it was restricted to adults only. Imagine that. A science fiction adventure being treated like a horror movie. Local councils even pushed back, arguing the rating was unfairly harsh. But the ruling stuck, and for years the film was barred from younger audiences in the UK. Only later, after its reputation as a sci-fi classic was secure, did the rating get relaxed. But in its day, War of the Worlds was literally considered too frightening for kids. Number 16, the Martian machines lived on and then melted down. The copper-green war machines are unforgettable, but their story didn't end with the credits. Byron Haskin, the director, later reused the same designs in his 1964 film Robinson Crusoe on Mars. If you watch closely, the alien ships look suspiciously familiar because they were literally recycled from War of the Worlds. But the real twist, only a handful of the original models survived. Several of the copper-made machines were reportedly melted down for scrap in the years after filming. Hollywood treated them like junk instead of preserving them as history. Today, collectors would pay fortunes to own one, but most are gone forever. It's a strange fate. Iconic Martian invaders reduced to scrap metal while their legend lived on in sci-fi cinema. From almost filming the whole movie illegally, to roasting actors under blistering heat lamps, to Martians that looked more like puppets. Then Invaders, War of the Worlds was chaos from start to finish. And yet, out of all the disasters, stress, and last-minute saves, it became one of the most influential sci-fi films ever made. It didn't just scare audiences in the 1950s, it set the stage for every alien invasion blockbuster that followed. So, what fact shocked you the most? Was it the butcher shop alien blood, the illegal filming, or those laughable early Martians? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more untold stories from behind the movies you thought you knew.